The sun was still low over the Texas plains when Ethan Cole tightened the worn leather strap on his boot. The dust of another endless morning swirled around him as he looked out over the land that had once been his family's pride, now just acres of drought-stricken soil, cracked like old parchment. The bank had already warned him, one more missed payment, and the ranch his father's dream would be gone. He wiped the sweat from his brow, took a deep breath, and mounted his old mare, Daisy. He had no idea that today, his life would change forever. The town square was busier than usual. Trucks lined the old dirt road, and people whispered in tight clusters, glancing toward the wooden stage that had been set up outside the auction house. Ethan thought maybe there was a cattle auction until he heard the words that made his stomach twist. Bidding starts at $5,000 for the girl and the unborn child. He turned his head sharply. There, standing on the stage in a faded white dress, was a young woman, her hands trembling, her face pale as paper. She couldn't have been older than 22. Her belly showed the gentle curve of late pregnancy. Her in-laws stood beside her, cold and expressionless. The older man, her father-in-law, perhaps barked something about family debt and saving face. Ethan could hardly believe what he was hearing. They were auctioning her off, selling her like livestock. Something burned in his chest. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was memory of his own mother, broken and crying after his father's death, when no one in town lifted a finger to help. He knew what cruelty looked like. And this was it? He stepped forward before he even realized what he was doing. The crowd fell silent as his boots hit the wooden steps. He looked at the woman, and for a brief moment, her eyes met his. They were tired, frightened, but beneath the fear, there was something else, a quiet plea for help. Ethan reached into his pocket. He had nothing, just a crumpled wad of bills, enough to buy feed and maybe fix one fence post. But his voice came steady when he spoke. "I'll take her." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone laughed. But Ethan didn't care. He took off his hat, placed the last of his money on the table, and said, "No woman deserves to be sold. I'll make it right, she's my wife now." The old man sneered but took the money. Maybe he thought it was a joke. Maybe he just didn't care. But to Ethan and to the trembling girl beside him, it wasn't a joke. It was salvation. He helped her down from the stage. For the first time, she spoke barely above a whisper. "My name's Lily." They signed a marriage paper that afternoon at the courthouse. No fancy vows, no flowers, no family. Just a worn pen, a quiet promise, and two broken souls who had nothing left to lose. When they reached Ethan's ranch, the wind carried the scent of dry grass and rain that never came. The house was small, the roof patched, but Lily smiled when she stepped inside. "It's beautiful," she said softly, running her hand along the wooden table. For weeks, they lived side by side like strangers, learning each other's rhythms. Ethan worked from dawn till dusk, mending fences and tending to what little livestock remained. Lily cooked simple meals, humming to herself, her hands resting often on her growing belly. At night, when the coyotes howled in the distance, Ethan would lie awake, listening to the sound of her breathing, steady, peaceful, and wonder how a woman so broken could bring such warmth to a place so cold. As the months passed, something began to change. Laughter returned to the old ranch, first in small bursts, then in waves. Lily painted the cracked porch railings white. She planted wildflowers near the window. Ethan built her a swing under the old oak tree where his father used to sit. And when the first rain finally came, Lily ran outside barefoot, arms spread wide, laughing as the sky poured down. Ethan watched her from the doorway, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. Then came the night her labor pains began. The storm was fierce thunder rolling across the hills, wind rattling the windows. Ethan rode out in the dark for help, his hands frozen on the reins. By the time he returned with the town's old nurse, Lily was already pale with exhaustion. Hours passed like eternity. Then, just as dawn broke, a cry pierced the quiet, a small, beautiful sound that made Ethan's knees go weak. A baby girl. Lily held her close, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She's safe," she whispered. "She's finally safe." Ethan couldn't speak. He just sat beside them, watching as the morning sun painted gold across their faces. That day, something shifted inside him. He had spent years fighting to save the ranch, to save the past, but in that moment, he realized what truly mattered wasn't the land beneath his feet, but the life before his eyes. Months later, a letter came from the bank. Ethan expected the worst, another demand, another threat. But instead, it was an offer. A neighbor he had once helped in a flood years ago had anonymously paid off part of his debt. The ranch was safe. When he told Lily, she just smiled and said softly, "See, kindness always finds its way home." Years rolled on. The drought ended. The ranch flourished again, greener than it had been in decades. Their daughter learned to walk, her laughter echoing through the fields. Sometimes, strangers passing through town would stop by the ranch and ask about the story, the one where a man bought a bride at an auction and married her that very day. Ethan would just smile, look toward Lily in the garden, and say, "I didn't buy her. I saved her and she saved me right back." As the sun set over the horizon, the wind carried the scent of hay and honeysuckle. The land that had once been dying was alive again, just like the two hearts that had found each other on the day fate brought them together. Because love, in its truest form, isn't born from comfort or perfection, it's born from courage. And sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings come from the most broken places. Moral: kindness doesn't always come wrapped in grand gestures. Sometimes it's a quiet act of bravery that changes two lives forever.